John thought a harmless slap on a royal guard would make him famous. Instead, he ended up in a courtroom where tradition, pride, and his freedom collided in the most brutal way possible. The sentence? Let's just say his joke turned into a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But how did it all go so wrong? Let's rewind. John Taylor, 28, was a self-proclaimed chaos artist, famous for his viral YouTube channel, American Idiot Abroad. His subscribers loved watching him turn bad ideas into even worse decisions, and John thrived on their constant demand for something crazier. On this particular morning in London, he was standing outside Buckingham Palace, the lingering effects of last night's pub crawl still clouding his brain. He wasn't there to admire the architecture. No, John had a different plan. The royal guards stood in their iconic red uniforms and fuzzy black hats, motionless as statues. A crowd of tourists gathered, snapping pictures and giggling at how impossibly still the guards were. John, with his camera in hand, saw his golden opportunity. "All right, people," he announced, stepping into the scene like it was his personal stage. "Today, we're testing a theory. Are these guys actually human? Let's find out." The crowd chuckled and phones began pointing his way. John grinned. This was the energy he lived for. He marched up to one of the guards, squinting dramatically. "Dude, are you real? Blink once for yes, twice for no," he said, waving his hand, inches from the guard's face. Nothing, not even a twitch. The crowd's laughter fueled him further. "Come on, man. You can't tell me you're not at least a little bored out here," John quipped, mimicking the guard's stiff stance. "Look, I'm doing your job now. Do I get a paycheck?" The tourists roared with laughter, but the guard remained unflinching. John leaned in closer, lowering his voice for added effect. "All right, I'm calling it. Wax figure." Still, no response. John's grin widened. The silence was a challenge he couldn't resist. "All right, folks," he said, turning back to the camera. "Let's take it up a notch." Then, with all the grace of a man who clearly hadn't thought things through, John raised his hand and gave the guard a playful slap on the shoulder. "Oh, you're real all right," he declared triumphantly. The laughter stopped dead. The guard didn't move, but his face turned a shade of red that screamed trouble. Before John could come up with another quip, a commanding voice rang out, "Step back immediately." John froze, turning to see another guard approaching, with a look that could cut glass. His grin faltered, but he raised his hands, trying to play it cool. "Whoa, hey, it's just a prank, bro." The new guard's stare was ice cold. "Step away, now." Sensing he'd pushed too far, John backed off. The crowd, phone still recording, murmured in anticipation. For a moment, it seemed like the situation had de-escalated. "All right, guys," John said, addressing his camera with a nervous chuckle. "I think we've learned our lesson. Guards don't play." But as he turned to leave, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. 3 guards were advancing toward him, their movements synchronized, their faces grim. "Oh no," John muttered under his breath. His brain scrambled for an escape plan, but all he could think was one thing: this is not going to end well. And his camera? Still rolling, of course. John, still basking in what he thought was his moment of viral glory, turned to his friends, who were laughing so hard they could barely keep their phones steady. "Did you see that? I'm going to be a meme by tomorrow," he announced proudly, waving his arms like he'd just scored the winning goal. "Dude, you're a legend," one of his friends wheezed, clutching his phone as he kept recording. "This is going to blow up so fast." But the celebration was cut short. 2 guards approached, their footsteps crisp and deliberate. They stopped just a few feet away, their expressions unreadable but not remotely amused. One of them, tall and imposing, stepped forward. His voice was as sharp as a knife. "You are under arrest for assaulting a member of the Royal Guard." John blinked. For a moment, he was sure he'd misheard. "Wait, what? Arrest? You've got to be kidding. This is a joke, right?" He laughed nervously, taking a step back. The guards weren't joking. They moved quickly, grabbing his arms and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. The metal was cold, and the click of the cuffs seemed to echo in his head. The crowd gasped, some whispering in shock, while others openly laughed or clapped. "Guys, come on!" John twisted around to look at his friends, hoping for some kind of intervention. "Bro, this is epic," one of them shouted, barely holding back tears of laughter. "Don't worry, we'll bail you out once this goes viral." "Are you serious right now?" John hissed as the guards pulled him toward a waiting squad car. His friends waved cheerfully, phones still pointed at him like this was some kind of comedy show. The ride to the police station was quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies the worst-case scenarios playing out in your head. John tried to convince himself it wasn't a big deal. "It's just a misunderstanding," he muttered under his breath. "I'll be out in an hour, no big deal." But as he was led into the station and shoved into a cramped holding cell, the seriousness of the situation hit him. The air smelled like cleaning supplies and stale coffee, and the metal bench against the wall was freezing. The guards who had arrested him were nowhere to be seen, replaced by police officers who barely glanced at him. He sat there, his nerves growing with each passing minute. Voices echoed through the hallway, officers talking about protocol, disrespect to the monarchy, and something about a national embarrassment. The words felt heavy, and for the first time, John wasn't sure how he was going to get out of this. After what felt like hours, the door to the holding area opened. Two men in sharp suits walked in, their polished shoes clicking against the floor. They looked like they belonged in a courtroom, not a police station, and their expressions were as cold as the cell itself. Mr. Taylor," one of them began, his voice calm but with an edge that immediately made John uneasy. "You are being charged with disorderly conduct, assault, and insulting representatives of the Crown. These are serious charges." John's jaw dropped. Assault? Insulting the Crown? This was a prank. Nobody got hurt. Come on, it's not that serious. The second man, who hadn't spoken yet, stepped forward. His tone was colder than the first. "Royal protocol does not recognize pranks. You will face an expedited court hearing." "A court hearing? For this? Are you kidding me?" John's voice rose in panic. "It was just a stupid joke." The men didn't flinch. "You should prepare yourself," one of them said before turning to leave. The door shut behind them with a finality that made John's stomach twist. He sank back onto the bench, his confidence shattered. The voice of his channel manager rang in his head. "All press is good press, right?" For the first time, John wasn't so sure. When John was dragged into the courtroom, he expected drama. What he didn't expect was how small and suffocating the place felt. The wooden benches were packed with journalists whispering furiously, and the judge sat high above it all, her presence larger than life. She was an older woman with sharp silver hair and an expression so severe it could have frozen a volcano. The moment her piercing gaze landed on him, John felt like a bug under a magnifying glass. He tried to play it cool, standing there in his rumpled clothes from the day before, but his palms were sweating. The silence in the room was deafening. Every cough, shuffle, or click of a pen echoed like a thunderclap. John swallowed hard, already regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. The prosecutor stood up, his suit immaculate, his voice carrying the weight of an entire nation's disapproval. "The Queen's guards are not tourist attractions," he began, his tone calm but sharp enough to cut through steel. "Their stillness represents the unwavering strength of our monarchy. To assault one is to assault the dignity of our nation." John's jaw dropped. "Assault? I didn't assault anyone. It was just a tap, barely more than a pat on the shoulder. I didn't mean any harm." But the prosecutor wasn't interested in excuses. He raised a hand, silencing John like he was a child caught talking out of turn. "Your actions have caused public outrage," he continued, his voice growing more intense with every word. "They've risked diplomatic tension and tarnished the image of our country. This is no small matter, Mr. Taylor." John could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. In the corner, the journalists were scribbling furiously, their whispers growing louder. He caught snippets of phrases like "reckless American tourist" and "disrespect to the Crown." His name was already making headlines, and not in the way he'd hoped. Mr. Taylor," the judge finally spoke, her voice low and firm, pulling the room into a hush. Her gaze felt like it was boring straight into his soul. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? You've insulted our nation, its traditions, and its people." John opened his mouth, desperate to defend himself, but nothing came out. What could he even say? He wanted to explain that it was a joke, that he never thought anyone would take it seriously. But under her gaze, all of his usual confidence melted away. The silence stretched on, unbearable. Then the judge continued. This court will not tolerate such disrespect. I hope you take this as a lesson." And then came the sentence. 5 years in prison. The room collectively gasped. John's stomach dropped like he'd just been pushed off a cliff. 5 years? For a prank? He barely registered the flurry of activity as the journalists began typing furiously, their cameras clicking like a swarm of locusts. His knees felt weak as he stood there, frozen in shock. 5 years. The words repeated over and over in his head, each time hitting harder. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was real, and his life had just been flipped upside down. As the guards moved to escort him out, John's mind raced. The viral fame, the laughs, the glory he'd envisioned, it was all gone, replaced by a crushing reality he couldn't escape. And for the first time, he truly understood. Not every stunt is worth the spotlight. What would you have done in John's place? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know if you face something similar. Don't forget to like and share. Your opinion matters. This story is here to raise awareness and make the world better.